Jesus Christ, look at that.
Jesus Christ!
Hell.
Are you ready to see the power of Mother Nature at its most destructive? In this video, we're going to show you 4 of the most monstrous tsunami waves ever caught on camera. The 2011 Tohoku Tsunami in Japan was one of the largest, strongest and deadliest natural disasters in recent history. On March 11, 2011, a 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of northeastern Japan. This would be the strongest earthquake ever recorded in Japanese history. The earthquake itself caused untold damage, but the nightmare for these coastal regions was only just beginning. When the earthquake finally stopped, a new disaster would be triggered in the form of a gigantic tsunami that would devastate most of the region. Shortly after 3 p.m, the nightmare began. The waves were monstrous, reaching towering heights of up to 128 feet in the air. To put that into perspective, that's almost 19 LeBron Jameses stacked one on top of the other at 6 foot 9 inches each. That is absolutely terrifying. These humongous waves weren't just massive, they were monumentally powerful, traveling at speeds of almost 800 kilometers per hour from the epicenter, crushing anything in their path up to 6 miles inland. Despite Japan being a technologically savvy country and being quite well aware of the dangers of earthquakes and tsunamis, the sheer power of this disaster meant that their previously built seawalls were no match, and many residents who heard the tsunami warnings felt that they were protected. How wrong they were, and how tragic the consequences would be. The destruction caused by the tsunami was unimaginable. Entire towns were wiped out in mere moments, as the waves crashed ashore with immense power, leaving nothing behind but destruction and devastation. The damage spread over 500 kilometers of the northeastern coastline, completely annihilating many cities and towns. Thousands of homes and buildings were destroyed or heavily damaged. As if an earthquake and a tsunami wasn't quite enough, another disaster was just around the corner. The tsunami itself caused a series of nuclear power plant meltdowns at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. It resulted in radiation levels so high that they had to be contained. Words can only describe so much from the damage and devastation that was caused during this event. However, images tell a story all of their own. Flooding and sea levels were of biblical proportions, and people simply could not believe what they were witnessing. The loss of life was astronomical. 16,000 lives alone were lost in Japan as a result of this disaster. Countless more were left homeless, with nowhere to go, as the aftermath grimly revealed entire towns decimated by the force of nature's wrath. During the course of this particular disaster, many heart-wrenching stories came to light. Stories of survivors who had no choice but to helplessly witness their loved ones being swept away by powerful waves. Other stories of families whose homes and businesses never recovered from being completely annihilated. And even stories of heroism during impossible situations, like those who risked their lives to rescue civilians from drowning or being buried under debris due to collapsing structures. Although it has now been over 10 years since this tragic event occurred, some regions are still recovering. And March 11th, 2011 will forever be remembered as one of nature's most destructive and devastating disasters.
Earthquake scientists race to work out the implications of this disaster for the rest of the world.
Japan will never forget this fateful day, but the same can be said for our next case. In a country which is a magnet for people looking for warm weather, beautiful beaches, but also a magnet for a series of deadly tsunamis. On September 28, 2018, the Indonesian island of Sulawesi was struck by a massive tsunami that caused widespread destruction and loss of life. The tsunami, much like the Japanese one, was triggered by an underwater earthquake, this time measuring 7.5 on the Richter scale. When the earthquake hit, everyone could feel it. Roads began to crack, and the landscape completely changed beneath their feet. This was an earthquake of biblical proportions. It left infrastructure unrecognizable, and also caused significant damage to ports along the coast, which disrupted shipping lanes for months afterwards. While communities were now more aware of the dangers of tsunamis, there was still little to no warning and nowhere to hide as the waves reached the land. The tsunami waves reached up to 20 feet tall, crashing into coastal areas and wiping out entire towns in its path. The tsunami itself damaged or destroyed thousands of homes, roads, and other infrastructure, leaving much of it unrecognizable. This particular tsunami caused a rare and petrifying natural disaster called liquefaction. The ground essentially turns to slush, eating up everything in its path, almost as though it were quicksand. Parts of central Sulawesi had been hit by major mudflows following the earthquake as a result of liquefaction. The most affected areas were that of Petitobo sub-district in southern Palu and the village of Balaroa just outside the city, both locations some distance from the coast. Balaroa almost disappeared as the ground collapsed, with most of the village's 1,500 plus houses sinking directly into the mud. Over 25% of its inhabitants were known to have died, and thousands were still missing. According to officials, nearly 17,000 people in Palu had been displaced by the earthquake and tsunami. However, the Indonesian National Board for Disaster Management stated that around 2.4 million people were affected by the earthquake and tsunami.
The death toll is already in the hundreds and is likely to rise further.
In addition to the physical damages, the tsunami also had devastating economic impact, with estimates reaching over $1 billion due to disruption in trade routes and lost livelihoods from ruined port facilities throughout Indonesia's coastline. Tragically, even though this occurred in September 2018, within 2 months, Indonesia would be facing yet another monumental disaster.
Deadly tsunami strike overseas with little warning and with more than 200 people killed on the northwest coast of Java, Indonesia.
This time though, triggered by a volcanic eruption and collapse into the sea, a tsunami would be generated by volcanic flank failures, meaning not only was it undetectable to buoy prevention systems.
The Indonesian Disaster Agency does have sensors on buoys on various coastlines, but the reality is their warning system is notoriously unreliable. It was an underwater landslide that triggered the waves. There's just no way for the system to have detected it.
It would also strike at approximately 10 PM, closing in on its prey in the darkness of night.
That band's lead vocalist surviving the killer wave, asking for prayers for his dead friends and his wife, now lost.
But if you'd like to learn more about this specific volcano eruption, then you definitely won't want to miss our Most Explosive Volcanoes episode, which we will link at the end of this video. And while the Anak Krakatoa case was tragic in its own right, it simply couldn't compare to our final case, which is considered one of the deadliest natural disasters mankind has ever endured.
What is that? Oh, tsunami.
December 26th, 2004. An earth-shattering 9.1 earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, triggered a massive tsunami that spanned across 14 countries, including India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and even sending waves across the globe as far as Africa and California.
Wave is a good 15-20 feet tall. Easy.
It was early in the morning on coastal resorts when many tourists were enjoying their Christmas vacations in the sun and would have been waking up with plans of relaxing on Boxing Day after the festivities of Christmas Day itself. No one would have ever expected or could even comprehend what was heading in their direction. Unlike in some of our other cases which have occurred slightly more recently, tsunamis and their warning signs were not as widely recognized at this time, and sadly, the earthquake that triggered this tsunami was so far out to sea on the fault line that it would not be felt by many coastal regions. This resulted in many stealth tsunamis that, instead of immediately scaring people away from the shoreline, would almost lure them into danger's path.
Was da hinten abgeht?
Irgendwie ein Seebeben gewesen sein.
In many resort areas, the sea line retreated, causing foreign tourists and even some locals to marvel at the shorebed being revealed. Boats being stranded where they would usually float atop of crystal clear waters. In the distance, many could see what looked like a white rolling trough off the horizon, with some wondering what exactly was heading towards them. It would only become apparent when, tragically, it was far too late and there was absolutely nowhere to escape. The waves, travelling at hundreds of kilometers per hour, reached up to 100 feet high and travelled up to 10 miles inland in some areas. The destruction caused by the tsunami was unfathomable. Resorts and entire villages were completely wiped out in seconds as the waves crashed ashore with immense power. With many of these islands being quite flat and shorelines with acute lead-up angles, the wave crescendos were emphasized. We can try to put into words the damage that this caused, but the footage really just speaks for itself. In India alone, over 5 million people were displaced due to flooding caused by the tsunami's powerful surge. From shorelines to train stations, the tsunamis had no remorse, wreaking havoc on anything and everything in its path. The 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami showed us just how destructive Mother Nature can be when she unleashes her wrath on mankind. Stories of survivors who had no choice but to helplessly witness their loved ones being swept away by powerful waves, only to be reunited days later. while others were not so lucky and would struggle to come to terms with what had happened to them.
I remember sitting up going, well, what on earth is that noise? And he got up and he opened the curtains and he had a look of horror on his face. And then everything else just started crushing back and rising up above my head. As well as pushing me backwards, it then started to push me under. And then I just remember thinking, I hope it's quick.
This tsunami killed 230,000 people across the 14 countries it decimated. It remains one of the deadliest natural disasters ever. Tragically, however, for those countries that surround the Ring of Fire fault line, where earthquakes and tsunamis are quite prone, this is not the first, nor will it be the last, that will wreak havoc on their coastlines and communities. These catastrophic events highlight just how powerful Mother Nature can be, and just how quickly these tsunamis can cause immense destruction. To date, there is no way that mankind can think of to stop the force of a powerful tsunami, and evidence has shown Mother Nature's ability to scale seawalls and preventative measures. So, which of these monstrous tsunami waves shocked you the most? Sound off in the comments, leave us a like, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, on Disaster Zone.